Yeah, I dare say it. How you guys doing? Don't mind me. It's about getting close to the time where I have to say it's going to be the 30th of October 21st, and it's going to be a Saturday morning. But it's only out until about an hour, and God knows how many minutes we got left. God, so good. So yes, I had to dig out something. Yes, I had to get the camera angle changed a bit, so screw it. It is the Zombie from Roseman, California, doing the trek. Yes, I am getting this thing off. Some of the stuff that we keep buying on the internet, because these things are kind of hard to come by sometimes. Magnetic base. Have to keep it away from the computer, otherwise I'm going to be losing data left and right. Magnets and magnetically induced information terminals do not mix. And especially when I have to deal with some things that are kind of precious enough anyway, so I have to keep the stuff away from well, it's not metal, it's anything regarding flash drives or anything else like that. But I just wanted to put this stuff on here temporarily to demonstrate a couple of things. Yes, you know I'm still a die-hard Trek fan because you've seen some of the stuff I've been wearing these days. But the thing of it is, I am trying to understand and trying to get past the grumbling, very much so grumbling, act of being a curmudgeon. The curmudgeon who thinks he knows everything, and therefore looking at everybody, including the youth, as, what the hell you think you're doing? Yeah, damn grumbling. Well, my grumbling is going to get myself into so much keel hauling problems, that's for sure. Real quick second. What else is up with that stuff away? I had been observing fandom for a hell of a long while since I was a kid, and been part of that fandom, and realized that beyond the Star Trek fandom, there are other fandoms out there in different genres and different series and shows that mine is just a drop in the bucket. From what some of the people have been talking about in their own places, they've seen the worlds in different, they've seen their own realities in their own worlds as a lot stranger than everything else. Sometimes they're afraid of it, other times they're quite excited it may happen. They may be part of it. The Trek genre that we have right now, a lot of people are still struggling for that, in the hopes that maybe Roddenberry's vision, the Star Trek fans' prophet, I should say, Gene Roddenberry, would show the fans a utopia to shoot for. An intergalactic, or at least a galactic utopia to aspire to centuries down the road. And we have to begin, or actually, we still have to continue to struggle down here before we can actually get out there. And along the way, when he was trying to show how much the galaxy and how much the universe is strange and diverse in their own limited ways, limited budgets and productions, the company was struggling like crazy just to get shows out. 3 seasons, 79 episodes. Then you had about a full season of animated cartoons. People keep arguing whether or not it's still canon or not. And the books and the magazines, the action figures, the movies coming out, and different series coming out, spewing off like crazy. Fan creations up the galore. My we still had this thing with the Doctor Who, we still had this thing coming up 77 with the Star Wars and everywhere else. Except each realm had their own unique problems and how they view how they view the universe in one way or another. Or the multiverse, if you want to see it that way. But just going for one man's vision at this point. For a long while, I celebrated that. For a long while, I had to admit that if Christ was around, maybe would he have celebrated it too? Well, the problem is, my adult self right now would think of me as a candidate for hell at this point because of my avarice, because of my way of choosing another person over something I was being educated by, and saying someone's version of what life could be like. Those are always a flip side to it, but there's also something to piss karma off like crazy. And there had to be some examples out there to remind me of it. And I'm going to bring this, instead of from a fandom point of view, to a literary critic point of view, and also a student of it. He's barely getting his feet wet. Dante's Divine Comedy, Milton's Paradise Lost, Euclides' Baccha, how many of these things and other ancient stories that were clashing with each other left and right, and sometimes they make absolutely zero sense. If you look at it one way, but then you look at it a different way, it looks absolutely perfect. Dante's Inferno was one of those books of Dante he wrote concerning about either dreams, ascension, or maybe something actually did happen to the guy where he's seeing his real life. He has to put it into a format for people to understand what they're going through. And yet, how our modern generation and how modern people are looking at things, including now to be fans of a lot of things. It just kind of puts me off a little bit. We have been so wrapped up in our fandoms these days. We've been wrapped up in our sports stars, in our cinemas. We have different heroes of different types that we have put a lot of faith and trust into. That hopefully one day would be part of that world, of that genre. That it would be to us something of a great deal, even though we will see that and admit that maybe the reality of it isn't so hot. However, we still wanted to be part of it. And the thing of it is, I know that feeling too damn well because I've been through the stages, and it still drives me crazy when I start thinking about it more and more. Growing up as a kid, I grew up under the shadow of Star Trek, of science fiction writers trying to identify their own reality at this point over here, while we actually had writers from well beyond doing the same thing of their own lifestyles. And it never occurred to the kid that I was trying to grow out of that concept. You know, because I had been put into that concept in the first place. I hadn't studied Euclides, the Baccha, of Greek stories like the Iliad or the Odyssey, and understanding and having the concept and perspective needed to put things into put them into place so I can understand why they're relevant. We all wanted a perfect world. We all wanted a utopia. The problem is, we can't have it. We can't have it. There's no way we can. Approximately 2,000 years ago, someone tried to tell us that. On the physical earth itself, it's not possible. We could try to better ourselves more in one way, be nice to our neighbors, demonstrate some kind of transferable quality that the universe might be able to recognize, that when it was that entity's time to pass beyond, that maybe the merits of whatever that entity had tried to do would be gratifying and satisfying enough to gain entrance into the utopia. The utopia of what was being taught or believed in. Now, for people following Jesus Christ, and for those who are following the Judeo-Christian, actually for the Jesuit way of living, the Hebrew, actually. There were mantras, there were lessons to be learned from different heroes and different aspects that we had to read and reread all the time to make sure that we'd understand what they were talking about. We could be taught by rote, but when it comes down for interpretation, it's a different story altogether. The stories are all verbal until they were actually being put in clay, and then passed down from generation to generation. And finally, we actually had the verbal in pieces into parchment, and thus to transfer. The lessons that we should have been learning, a lot of them had been thrashed, burned alive, burned into disintegration. Because we had ignorance and indifference searching out what they thought was the issues. You can't read this, you can't learn this, you can't do this, you can't. Because this is a threat. This is a threat to this particular reality, this particular time, this particular knowledge over here. It is dangerous. You cannot go past this. You cannot. Part of that I was sticking in my head, and I was coming across that all throughout my life in different portions. How people say that you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't. Even in the Garden of Eden, it was the same situation. You can't do this. I mean, if you happen to eat this particular fruit, you're going to be screwed left and right, and you don't know what you're unleashing here. By curiosity being naive. You can tell the person, but the problem is, you can put enough safeguards in that one. You keep the person away. You think just by admonishing a kid is going to be enough. The kid's got to have his face burned off first, before he understands that fire is deadly. Fire is dangerous. Fire is a tool. Fire is a plasma. It can be used in many ways, but it's also quite deadly. So is truth, so is reality, so is experiencing life beyond the utopia. So now man would have to struggle all his life, hoping that maybe somehow he'd be worthy enough to cross those barriers again. If he was beaten up enough in life, he sacrificed enough, or actually if he Maybe didn't sacrifice not enough to get in there. But books like the Dante's Inferno, how a Florentine Italian was trying to educate his people, but also educate the future, and using Catholic ways of understanding life itself in their own viewpoint, does give us a little bit of clarification on how we're looking at ourselves these days. But also, in certain aspects that we're supposed to be looking at for the future as well. I can't explain it even further than that, because when I'm reading about the writers of ancient times, it's not the language, it's the message that's being delivered that still needs to be digested. They can put it in ancient Shakespearean at this point over here, and I'd still have an issue with it, unless I get the message digested enough and say, now I got you. So yes, education is important. Education is indeed necessary, because it helps with you analyzing your world that you are currently living in, even though they are using ancient tools. But some of those morals that we're learning have already been crossed over through generations after generations. The stuff that we're still recognizing right now as it is. And that also comes across into the science fiction realm that we have right now. I've seen how actors and producers and creators all giggling, laughing together about how they're seeing how the future is. Ancient farts like me who have been seeing things like this, they're going into different texts, different books, and then comparing them to the new stuff out there. All I'm seeing is recycle, 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 recycle. But some people actually just don't get it, do they? They don't understand it just yet. It takes them a while for the information to get into their heads. So, I'm dealing with that right now as it is. The fandom, the worshiping, the other stuff like that is it's not needed, not worship, it's not needed. I can understand the message of one guy was trying to kill everybody else, but the problem is, he's just one man. And sometimes we put too much emphasis on those prophets of the whatever kind of thing we're looking for or being educated about. Some people may consider that Gene Roddenberry, elder, was the prophet of Star Trek, of man's future. In order for man's future to happen, man had to have a past, the building stones, the stepping stones, the pathways, get him to that way. There had to be morals, there had to be boundaries to be crossed, lessons to be learned, things to understand. Fans don't take that into consideration as much. They're into the pop culture of it. But if some of them actually did, to be in my age, a little bit older than that, while reading other texts and other subject matters that may or may not relate to what their fandom is trying to elucidate on. I don't know how to explain it to the younger generations, except to say that the books are ancient, dusty, moldy sometimes. The material is convoluted and out of your style. maybe the technology is scary as hell. But the thing of it is, throughout our lifetime, human beings have been learning this way on different formats. But they were still trying to get the message across, whatever it was. We want something beyond. We have to sacrifice for that. We have to go beyond our own lives and our own limitations, our own explorations. Some people are caught up in their own personal dramas of what's happening these days. As there's a yelling at the apartment that I'm hearing outside. Reality checks. I've been taking classes at a community college for several years. Taking it easy, 2 classes at a time is the only thing I can deal with these days. I've had enough issues on my plate to warrant that. And while I'm going there at an age of 55 currently, and trying to discover more and more, I'm trying to put things in more context and more perspective now. How things are becoming more and more relevant and prevalent. How everything else has a purpose and a connection. I'm hoping maybe, just maybe, the future generations, when they've actually looked at some of the stuff I've been spewing out these days, might help them out to understand their viewpoints and how they're looking at their own lives, in their own time, in their own context, their own perspectives. I can only say to the generation I've grown up under regarding science fiction, wonderful it is, the foundations you still have to understand how and why we got here in the first place. Not because of one man's dream. We've all had that dream. We just had one guy producing something that gave it cause to be ignited in all of us. But it was still inside of us. We still had to look for it. We still had the stories of old, of ancients, to help motivate us and guide us and to lead us forward. We've had knowledge being passed from generation to generation to generation. We had context without perspective sometimes. Each generation had to put in its own perspective to look at the context necessary to figure out how it applied. We're doing the same thing every time we're writing up new series or new shows for the genre that we're dealing with right now. And to educate people this way, to let them know that this is the way we've been doing it for a hell of a long while since we were able to record anything. So, as for being a Star Trek fan, let me just say that for a long while I had followed one mortal man's vision, while not paying attention and heed to the ones I was growing up under to really pay attention to and heed. This is just vanity. This is just vanity. The real thing is our own teachings that we've been coming across left and right, they actually do mean a thing for us. It does mean a great deal for us. This is what we have to celebrate more and more of. And even if it has to be put under a different shade to celebrate whatever it is we're celebrating, sometimes I wonder, is it enough? And final comments. For a long while I wasn't afraid, and I wasn't ashamed of being a Star Trek fan, or Star Wars fan, or Battlestar Galactica, or any of the sci-fi shows out there. I was a sci-fi nutshell. And I've also imagined that that kind of context, that perspective, would not have been possible without learning about perspectives prior, about the context prior, to bring me to that point. I'm not celebrating the fandom as much as other people do, but I am celebrating context and perspective that I have learned. And that's the thing we still have to work on these days, isn't it?